So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the Aurum feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, let's then make an analysis also regarding what he said of Revelation, or then the Apocalypse known as the Autumn Feast. And then let's understand also where then states very precisely in Hebrews chapter 10 as the guidelines of the New Testament. And then in chapter 10 it states, for in the Torah there are shadows of the prophetic events to come. So then it's understandable that then the writer stated also not only the substance of these themselves. So let's then explain what these section relates, because not the substance of these. So what he is saying is this: in the Torah, he's making a reference of Vayikra, the 23rd chapter regarding the feasts. So then, as far as these particular writings of Hebrews, you find then the spring feast then was completed. The person who wrote Hebrews, understandably, is related with Yohanan, because Yohanan was very much a person that did understand what the Mashiach was doing, and he was part of his team when he was on duty on this earth, not as high priest. Then he states, therefore, although these same sacrifices were every year given, they could never make perfect those who gave them. Now, this is a bit interesting, because when there is harmony with Yod He Vav He, the designer, obviously you have to make a reference of what function. It's not only saying Yod He Vav He, but it's explaining then the function. Obviously this section does not explain, so it goes by the generic name then Elohim. Continuing, for if they had perfected them, they would not long ago have desisted from their gifts or then sacrifices, because their conscience could no more compel them who were then once purified, than on behalf of their sins. Truly, this section is not relating with a person of having license to sin. The reason why the Hamashiach ben Yosef was extremely upset during the time of his service, and he had driven away those people who were making deals with animals near the temple. And the reason why he did this, because people were licensing themselves and they were involved with the sin consciously. Now what then Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is explaining is because of their conscience. So then what he's saying is because of their conscience could no more compel them, who was then once purified on behalf of their sins. Now he's explaining of sacrifices. The trouble is the Mashiach has nothing to do with these sacrifices. First, because the Mashiach had no sin himself. He was a representative of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, so since we understand from Ezekiel that no person can pay for the sin of the other, because these we do understand then that Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, the designer, never changes. Now if we read this New Testament and we think then the Mashiach gave himself on behalf of sins, then what you are saying is what Yod-Heh Vav-Heh said was a lie. And obviously he never does. So then this section we then can consciously consider the fact that the person who wrote it previously because each person was responsible for his sin. When there was sin, then the animal obviously was sacrificed, but it's not for Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. This is where then many people they stumble, because they think they are giving the sacrifice to the divine in exchange for their sin, but the problem is it's not for the divine. There is no reason that a person should give sacrifices on behalf of the divine, because the divine does not receive sacrifices. Sacrifices are related with sin. Payment of sin is because of the evil, not because of the divine. So then for many centuries people began their quests of understanding why then the cities of the Mashiach, or then why the tabernacle then is returning. Because people simply have received the translation that's absolutely mixed up. Now conscientiously try to understand a designer that made the whole lot perfectly. Why would he receive sacrifices of his own creation in exchange for a situation that he did not involve himself with? But since there is a contrary power in the world, so then this contrary power, in order to let a person in harmony with Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, then the sacrifices are performed. So then if you then are seriously studying the holy instructions, and you truly believe that the designer never changes from what then the prophets stated, then you must understand that what Ezekiel said, no person can pay for the sin of the other, then this section you have to reorganize it so you can line up with original manuscripts. Otherwise, then, if you believe there is a designer and he never changes, then this truly is not in line of what the prophet Ezekiel stated. It's a very dangerous situation, because if we read these and then if we are deceived thinking that a person is going to pay for the sin of the other, then we are making a claim that the designer is a liar. And it cannot be so. So the only option is the translation was not properly translated. People don't want to be named evil or wicked. But the best way of understanding the scripture is step-by-step formation of these understandings, and then making sure the person who had sinned previously, before the coming of the Hamashiach ben Yosef, he had to bring an animal and he himself slaughter it. These are facts. Simply facts. Any person with understanding of a language, then you can read these and then receive it, because you are not religious. If you're not religious, you're not involved with sacrifices. So much so, if you don't participate of any church or any congregation or any group of people. So then, reading these sobering understandings can help you search for the divine in yourself, without the influence of pastors, teachers, scoundrels, and you name it. Because what these people are involved with is with an easy lifestyle. Not saying there are evil people, but they do not work. No place in the scripture states that a person involved with any kind of a ministry should not work. It doesn't exist. Shaliach Shaul, known as Paul, gave the example. And when he was saying then the person who does the work for the divine should live by the divine, he's not saying that people should pay them. They should work regularly as the others. Now there are periods of time where then the divine selects certain objectives, and for a period of time a person sometimes depends on other brothers and sisters for everyday living, but only for a time. The rest of it a person must work. So this situation of pastors and teachers living, from the money that people are bringing, it's absolutely against the scripture. This was invented by the translations of the Greco-Romans. So then you can imagine the unfortunate situation of our nation that has thousands upon thousands upon thousands of denominations, and then these people, they simply don't work. They go through some theology learning of their own. They get a license of some sort, and they go around and deceiving people. Not because they are evil, because they were taught wrongly. And unknowingly, they are evil, and they are teaching scripture that simply they don't exist. Now, the situation is these people can work regularly, and during their own time, then they can come up with a study, gathering of a group, perfectly fine. As long as Yod He Vav He said, a person must work, a laborer is worthy of his labor. The person must work. Now the wives, however, they are exempt from doing duty work in the world. Now they can interpret the way they want at any kind and level. If you read the scripture, the work of the wives is obviously having the privilege of staying home, nice and easy. They do their light work, take care of the kids, stay in peace at home, and the crazy load of work outside, then that man has to bear the burden. That's the way it was. Now in our modern world, some interpret properly, some people interpret it as macho man, or whatever translation you want to read, or interpretation you want to make. So then, reading from the scripture, the enlightenment of the Hamashiach ben Yosef, we understand that the people back in those times, they had a close relationship with Yod He Vav He and Yeshua. The reason why they were interested in the talks of the Mashiach ben Yosef is because Yod He Vav He was behind it. So what was the one reason? Now, during these times of crisis, is it, for instance, feasible only for the husband to work and bear the entire burden? Each person should answer the question. On one side, the people want to be obedient. The other side, the economics, they don't let. So those people who are obedient should have a balance. But the situation of these huge ministries and these people not working, it's the invention of the Greco-Roman translation. Each person must work, and there are levels. Regular work, the man has to bear the burden, and the light work at home, then it's given to the wives. And so then when you read, then the New Testament states then that the older women should teach the younger women, and these are the situations of life, how to maintain properly a home. Then also in Proverbs, the 31st, you find then the perfect wife, how it should be. These are the plans of the designer, not mine, neither yours. But if you believe there is a divine and divine instructions, this is what they are. Now, doesn't mean then the wives, they must stay home every time during this modern world. If you think so, then you are crazy. There are obligations, absolutely, but they should not be inside the home every time. Sometimes they have to go to the supermarket, to get a product, to get, sometimes they go in a pharmacy or, other places. So they have to drive around without neglecting their obligations. So then, this section of Hebrews explaining the importance of Yod He Vav He, the designer, not changing. He's always constant. So then we evaluate what are other scriptures that should be in line of what then the prophets taught. Then you yourself then can make this study of the prophets. Then you read the New Testament and you yourself have to line up this scripture in a way that whatsoever Yod He Vav He, the designer, has said should not change. Then you are faithful. Now at any point you begin shifting from somebody paying for your sin, or then a person would bring the animal to the priest, and situations of New Testament and using Elohim every time, or God. That's why then sometimes translations are so vague, because it's simply God can be either Elohim or Yod He Vav He or any function. In each of those they have a specific distinction. Now this understanding is for your own benefit. That's why then Yod He Vav He, in his position of Galah or Revelator, uses then those people who are lining up with his instructions, so other people can learn and save their souls at the end, as per what then Shaliach Shimon has said. So then, next time, I want to evaluate even more of these scripture of Hebrews, because understand a situation. Those people who are then not constant, those people who are not in line with instructions, even though they have in their own New Testament states the foundation of the apostles and prophets is then the Torah, and then they think the Old Testament was done away with. Let me ask you this: how can they understand that the divine never changes? Because in one point, if the divine changes, then becomes a wave of doctrine. Then you find pastors have 10, 20 wives, lovers, brand new car every year, making trips. Reminding myself a long time ago when I was working on the island of Maui. And there were pastors that were going over there. And bluntly, they would say, oh, because God had sent them there. Oh, sure. Paying great, nice hotels, drivers. How much more stupider can people get? They are not there to do God's work. They're going there to enjoy themselves with the money of the people. Now, there are gatherings. Absolutely are gatherings. But when you hear these pastors and teachers gathering up in places, then the congregation pays for a hotel, pays for meals, drivers, gasoline, the whole 9 yards. This is against the scripture. They have to do regular work as everybody else. That's why then there are so many people who get so frustrated with churches. They take notes home, they read, they study, and after a while they simply get tired of it. Because in the very center and the core of their being, there is a voice there stating what you're doing there simply doesn't work. Now you may interpret these as the divine, but truly this is the very conscience of the human being that was there, giving you then a warning. These things, they don't work. You try, fails. Because these traditional situations were not meant from the designer. These were merely traditions. They were given and given and given, generation and generation, for centuries. When these people then they began to convert themselves in lining up themselves, and they do regular work like everybody else, then we can understand the core of their obedience. You can be sure of it. Most of these pastors, if they are put on a labor work, they are going to put aside the divine of their own understanding real fast. Because it is a God of convenience. Obviously, there are many of these establishments, they do help people. It's absolutely no question about it. Now, does it justify for people, a tiny portion of these, then they live like kings? No, it doesn't justify. They can help people as long as they are being obedient themselves. And it's absolutely unjust for these people gathering up money from the others who are working so hard. And then they have houses paid for, meals paid for, gasoline paid for, water, electricity, telephone. And let me ask you this soberly. Where do you find in the scripture that you should do this? Now, if you believe that the divine, the designer, changes not, you won't find it. Bring to the storehouse then what belongs then to the designer, then you're going to overflow. This is related with the Feast of Tabernacles. Once a year, you will give your percentage to the tabernacle or the temple. If you study a bit the Parsha or then sections of the real Peshitta, you're going to find the teachings there. Now, the only reason I don't give you precisely where is the chapter, where is the verse, because my translation might not be in line with yours. Then you hear this, and your first situation that comes in, being pushy. So you hear a layer of truth, then you yourself have to take the scripture and find where it is located at in your own translation until the divine leads you. So then, next time we're going to make an evaluation, and then regarding Galah, then we are going to talk regarding sanctification. Where does it come from? And then the situation of being clean with the death of someone else. And based from these, then we can make sure then that the Yod He Vav He, the designer, is in line every time with every scripture you read. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.